When someone asks about your childhood and you just freeze for a moment, like the answer isn't quite there. Not because it was terrible, not because nothing happened, but because somewhere between the ages of about 7 and 17, it feels like you skipped a few chapters. You remember pieces. A house, certain responsibilities, maybe a few scattered moments. But when people talk about carefree childhood memories, sometimes it feels like they're describing a life that moved at a completely different speed. And there's a reason that can happen. Sometimes childhood ends quietly, long before anyone realizes it. Not with a dramatic moment, not with something you could point to on a timeline. Sometimes it happens in small shifts. Making dinner for younger siblings while a parent works a double shift. Becoming the unofficial mediator between adults during arguments. Learning to read the emotional temperature of a room before you even learn to read chapter books. Slowly, without anyone announcing it, the child becomes the stable one. Psychologists actually have a term for this pattern: parentification. It describes situations where a child begins taking on roles that normally belong to adults. Responsibilities, emotional support, keeping the household functioning. But that clinical word doesn't quite capture what it feels like from the inside. Because for the child, it rarely feels unusual. It just feels like life. Children adapt quickly to whatever environment they grow up in. If stability depends on them stepping up early, their nervous system learns to do exactly that. They become observant, responsible, attentive to other people's needs. Adults often praise this. Teachers call them mature for their age. Family members rely on them. But psychologists have found something important. What looks like maturity from the outside is often something else entirely. It's adaptation. A child's nervous system learning to function in a situation where someone has to keep things together. Research on parentified children shows that many of them develop extremely strong emotional awareness. They learn how to read people very quickly. They can sense tension before anyone says a word. They notice subtle mood changes the moment someone walks through the door. Problem solving becomes second nature, because waiting for someone else to solve the problem wasn't really an option. These abilities can look like superpowers. In many ways they are. But they also come with a hidden cost. Because when a child grows up focusing on everyone else's needs, they slowly learn to ignore their own. Over time, the brain creates an internal rule. Other people first, my needs later. And that rule doesn't just disappear once childhood ends. It quietly becomes part of how the brain organizes relationships and decisions. Years later, it often shows up in adulthood in subtle ways. People who grew up too fast are often the ones others rely on during a crisis. They stay calm. They handle complicated situations. They're the dependable ones. From the outside, it looks like strength. And it is. But internally, something else is often happening. Their nervous system never really learned how to switch off. When your childhood required constant awareness of what might go wrong, your brain becomes used to scanning for problems, planning ahead, preparing for every possible outcome. Even when life becomes stable, the mind may continue running the same program. Stay alert. Stay useful. Stay responsible. This is one reason people who grew up too fast often struggle with something surprisingly simple: rest. They can handle major challenges, big problems, unexpected crises. But resting without feeling guilty can feel strangely uncomfortable. Because somewhere early in life, rest got linked with risk. If you relaxed, something might fall apart. so the brain learned to stay active. Another place this pattern appears is in relationships. When love in childhood was connected to being helpful, responsible, or needed, the brain begins to associate those roles with connection. Being needed starts to feel like being valued, and that can shape the kinds of relationships someone feels most comfortable in later in life. They may naturally step into the role of problem solver, caretaker, the one who keeps everything stable. At the same time, receiving support can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, because vulnerability wasn't something they had much room to practice earlier. Letting someone else hold responsibility may feel strange at first. Another long-term effect shows up in something psychologists call emotional labor. People who grew up managing emotional environments often become incredibly skilled at reading a room. They can sense tension quickly. They know how to smooth conflicts. They instinctively try to keep everyone comfortable. Sometimes they do this without even realizing it. It becomes automatic, like breathing. But over time, constantly managing other people's emotional environments can become exhausting, because attention is always going outward, toward everyone else, and very rarely toward yourself. This can create a strange emotional experience, being surrounded by people and still feeling unseen, not because others don't care, but because the habit of hiding your own needs became so normal. Eventually, many people start asking a difficult question. Did I actually have a childhood? Or did I just move straight into responsibility? Recognizing that question can be uncomfortable, because there wasn't necessarily a single traumatic event. Sometimes it was just 1,000 small moments where you had to be a little more responsible than a child should be. But acknowledging that experience doesn't mean blaming anyone. It simply means understanding how your nervous system adapted. An understanding that can open the door to something new. Learning that being needed is not the same as being valued. Learning that rest doesn't mean things will fall apart. Learning that you're allowed to receive care without earning it first. For many people, this also involves something surprisingly important. Grieving, not in a dramatic way, but in an honest one. Recognizing that a certain version of childhood never really happened. The version where you could be messy, carefree, needy, and still be supported without having to hold everything together. That child deserved that space. And acknowledging that truth doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you honest. The strange thing about growing up too fast is that it often produces incredibly capable adults. Resilient, perceptive, reliable. But those same adults sometimes forget something important. They don't have to carry the same weight forever. The child who learned to hold everything together did something remarkable. They adapted. They survived environments that required more than most children are ever asked to give. But adulthood offers something new. The chance to slowly learn skill that never had space to develop earlier. Letting someone else help. Allowing yourself to rest. Being taken care of without immediately trying to repay it. Those things might feel unfamiliar at first. And that's okay, because in many ways, you're learning them for the first time. That child who grew up too fast did an incredible job keeping things together. But they don't have to run the whole system anymore. It's safe to let go a little, to be imperfect, to be supported, to finally experience some of the freedom that childhood was supposed to offer, even if you're discovering it a little later than most. And once you really see that clearly, it starts to connect to patterns in how people give, overextend, and define their worth. And if this resonated with you, you're already noticing something most people spend years not fully understanding.